I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Oscar nominee John Powell, composer for Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. Um, John, you're renowned for these beautiful, big, bombastic scores like How to Train Your Dragon, Solo, Happy Feet, the Bourne films, just to name a few. And then you're tapped to compose for this documentary. And ordinarily, I'd be asking, oh, okay, well, how did you adapt your work for something that's very different? It's not a narrative feature, but you didn't approach this like a documentary, did you?
Well, I didn't really know how to. Yeah, no, I only did it because I liked Davis so much, and Michael is an extraordinary sort of subject matter. I really truly got lost in the sense that I'm used to narrative structure that is, constructed, as opposed to sort of found, which I think is what documentary. I mean, I honestly cannot speak with any kind of expertise on documentaries, because I guess I've watched them all my life. I've loved them, but I've never really thought of doing music for them. They always seemed a different beast. So this was, I think, Davis thinking, okay, well, this guy is much more of a sort of a film guy, and we've got a subject which is about who does films, so maybe apply that concept to it. I think, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the music on this film could have been melancholy and contemplative, but I'm so glad you didn't take it in that direction. Davis, the director, mentioned to Gold Derby actually that he wanted the music to be big and sound like an 80s movie, which is so appropriate. So what inspired some of those choices? Because they work beautifully for the film.
Well, there is 80s music in it, a lot of it,
Yes.
and there's some 80s one of the best scores of all time, which is from Michael's breakout film, Back to the Future, which is Alan Silvestri. So I wish I had written that, but I didn't. But the thing that I did is everything else that seems to just kind of mostly about watching a man who has always moved so kind of lively. I just kind of kept that going. I kept this idea that he's dancing through his life. I do the dance thing quite often. I mean, I've done it a lot. I've talked about it, doing it on action films. But this is an actual man who basically is kind of moving constantly since he was born. And the whole idea of the film is that it took Parkinson's to sort of get him to calm down.
Yeah, it's so true. And then the opening sequence is really unusual. It employs this ambitious and compelling instrumentation. I think as he's in his bed, noticing his hand twitch, and then goes into the MRI and things like that. Well, we're just getting a sense of how he discovered this disease and how it affected his life. What was behind some of the choices as a palate cleanser for the journey that we're about to go on with him?
Well, there's a lot of electronic stuff in that one, really, so it's sort of almost like sound design and things. And Davis liked that. We didn't ever discuss it, but I think it was just something I was fiddling around with, and he was attracted to it. But one of the things that is there, and sort of is is thematic, as it were, is that they were talking about trying at the beginning that kind of that whistle effect that sound effects guys put in when bombs have just gone off. And I said, well, why don't I try it with a violin, really high violin? If you play a high harmonic on a violin and you put the microphone too close to the violin, you get this really weird whistle, but plus this kind of really grungy sound as you try and pull horsehair over a piece of very, very tightly strung metal on the E string. And so I found some samples, and we liked the idea. So the irony of that was that one of the things that Michael had said to Davis when he agreed to do it, he said, okay, I'll do it, but as long as there's no violins, which of course he meant nothing sappy. And that is definitely what we were trying to do. But I love the idea of having this almost the theme that was started as the devil, the pain that he was going to suffer from Parkinson's. This high, painful noise. And then through the movie, I use it quite a few times, and then it sort of appears again right at the end. And I think you realize that it's the idea was that it sort of comes out of a very pretty piece of violin, writing, which then goes it goes up and up and up and up and ends up on the same note. So I don't know if people get that, but that was the theory of it, which is, that was Davis's thing, is that how do you take a disease and that's as debilitating and actually gain grace from it? And that was their idea.
And that's the point, exactly. I typically don't read about the composer's thought process and stuff. I just like to come into these interviews pretty clean, just from what I can hear. And I'm thinking that's an organic sound, but it's not. And it made me feel uneasy. And it's so interesting that you're using a violin, which normally you would play for when someone's sad or melancholy, and you're able to kind of turn it on its head. That's so fascinating. And then, of course, when he's in, when we're seeing, for example, the control room at the live taping, when people are laughing on set and we see Fox's ascent to stardom, it's exciting and uplifting. And I'm just wondering, what's the key to uplifting the audience by eliciting excitement? Because you're very good at that, and you've done that a lot in your narrative features.
I don't know. I listen as a kid. I used to listen to a lot of ballet music, classical ballet music, Russians and French ballet music, and I always found the joy in it. I think that's one of the things that's always attracted me to music is the joy I felt. I find that to be quite transcendent. So I just always look for the joy, and I think Davis heard that in lots of scores, and even though he didn't want a big bombastic score, he wanted the same joy, I think, in it. So I had a smaller ensemble, but I guess I couldn't help myself. It came out joyful.
Yeah, it absolutely does. How does it work with a composer when you have obviously a lot of music supervision or direction on the project as well? Obviously, this employs a lot of themes from Fox's movies, a lot of songs from the 80s, and that's interspersed with your original music. And sometimes they're so blended that you don't know where one starts and one ends, which I think is really, really nice. It's really appropriate for what we're watching. But is that challenging for the composer?
No, it's really easy, actually, because when it works, when the songs work and everybody's, and they've been able to get the rights, that's the tricky one. The only tricky thing about it is sometimes you want to, because part of the job is to sort of just like smooth everything out, get in and get out things, and just do that. I mean, I've done that a lot in my career, but the great one is when you do it, it's perfect, and then they call from the dub and they say, "Oh, we had to change the song, and it's in a different key, and it sounds like you just crashed into the song." But in this case, they cleared everything. Randy Post is brilliant, and he'd done all of this, and with Davis and the editor, I mean, it was all done for me. I was like, I didn't really have to do any of that other than just make sure that I didn't clash with it. I also didn't clash tonally with it. So when it's already in existence, you're just sort of being a craftsman. You're trying to be a craftsman. But when it doesn't exist and you're part of it, I mean, I don't really do that kind of thing. But occasionally, like on Happy Feet, I'm involved in all the songs, all the music. I have to sort of help construct that as we go along. But no, that was the easy bit. The harder bit was just documentaries. It's really hard.
Oh, I can only imagine. I love this movie so much. It's so beautifully done. And John, thank you so much for your time today. We'll bring you back shortly for our group chat.
Pleasure.